Kirk from What's New Video Games. Be sure to check him out. He's linked below in the description, and we wanted to break down the Ubisoft Forward. I was sort of done. I was like, okay, I've covered so many showcases. I've been sitting in the chair for a while, so I shut down yesterday afterwards after some brief thoughts, but we wanted to walk through this. There were Star Wars Outlaws, AC Shadows, Skull and Bones. Division did something afterwards that we're actually going to talk about, so if you want to know my thoughts on that as somebody who's got a long history with Division, I'm going to end the previous stream. We watched Dragon Age the Veilguard. If you want to see my reaction and breakdown of that gameplay, we kind of got into it. If you want to see that, go check out that video. I'm going to end that and bring people over with a redirect. So, Kirk, the first thing I want to do, I obviously want to dive down into each of these categories specifically. The main two, obviously, pieces of the meal are Star Wars and Assassin's Creed Shadows. But before we do that, I just want to get your take, maybe your overall impression on the way that they approached maybe having less games but deeper dives. There's been different opinions on that, and I for one thought it was a much better structure. I liked that they said, listen, and they've also kind of internally said this, we're going to kind of focus on digging down deep with good games instead of just, here's Far Cry 95, So give me your flyover of the event structure before we dive into each game.
I loved it. Obviously, kind of the whole point of having a showcase, and this is something they've got a little bit of criticism for since the show yesterday, but it seemed like some of the point of that was to get you in for those two major games that they know you want to see, and then be like, hey, here's all of our ongoing service games and updates that are happening with those and whatever. But like the screen time and your attention time they took for that was very brief. They're like, hey, we just want to remind you, like, Riders Republic exists. For Honor exists. Like, if you wanted to go play those for any reason, we do update those. We do bring content to those on a regular basis. We know you don't want to play them, but just so you know, they're there. Okay, here's 15 minutes of the game that you want to see. Like, I liked that. I thought that was the right way to go about it. They respected our time. And not only did they respect our time by not wasting it with, like, the reminders. Like, the reminders were very brief. It's just like, hey, this is kind of obligatory. Like, we want this game to keep thriving, keep surviving. We have a player base. But, like, hey, maybe you used to play it. And for me, like, For Honor was like, oh, yeah, I could go play For Honor again. Like, that. Maybe I want to do that, actually. Same thing with Riders Republic. I used to play Steep. I've been saying for a while I want to jump into Riders Republic. Like, that reminded me, like, oh, skateboards are in that game? That would be awesome. Like, maybe it feels like Tony Hawk. But, like, the time that they took for that was, like, boop, and we're moving on. Boop, and we're moving on. And then, like, the depth that they gave us with Assassin's Creed and Star Wars was, like, I think exactly what we would have wanted to see. Like, you talked about the Xbox showcase and how some of that gameplay was like, oh, it's a real quick cut. Oh, now we're back to cinematics. Oh, it's a real quick. Oh, this is really tight. Like, why, South of Midnight really wowed us because it was just an elongated segment of gameplay. And this took that to the nth degree and was like, I just loved, especially in Star Wars Outlaws, how they were like, okay, this is what it seemed like, at least. We've heard all the discourse about Starfield, all the criticism about how it doesn't feel fluid, how it doesn't feel like you're going to do something on this planet and then you're going to be done and you're going to get on your ship and you're going to fly out into space and you're going to go to another planet, land there, and your adventure continues. How about we show you that? How about we show you what it would look like if you just sat down and started playing this game?
Yeah.
And all the things that you can come across. And, oh, now there's a dogfight in space that you can join if you want to. Or you can just lead them to fend for themselves against the Empire. Like, just, it felt so fluid and organic and natural in a way of, like, let's show you what this game actually feels like to play. And I almost feel bad for, like, when we talked about Xbox and like how curated their cuts were. I used Ubisoft as a comparison. Like in years past, I almost feel bad for doing that because they didn't do that at all really with these games. They really showed us what it feels like, what it looks like to sit down and play these games, and like what type of gaming experiences you're going to get on a moment-to-moment basis. And I was so impressed by that.
I want to do that now. I want to dive into Star Wars here first. You kind of already dipped your toe into, one of the things a lot of people felt was, oh, wow, She goes all the way to the hangar, all the way into the ship, all the way to the cockpit, like, and the ship's got all these different areas that she could have gone. And then there is a slightly, I would say, hidden loading screen, but she does pretty much take off, and then she can get into a dogfight. And before we get into this, guys, very quickly, we have come over from a new stream, so if you guys have been lurking, hit the like button. Thanks so much for coming over from the previous stream. I said in my reaction to the dogfight that I got on screen right now, I loved how honest this dogfight was. It was like, yeah, that's what it's like. There's a lot of spinning and turning and turning and more turning. It's like that's typically what dogfights feel like in games like this. It didn't feel free and easy and arcadish. It was like, no, there were actually some angles that you had to hit and a lot of spinning and a lot of where'd they go. I think that was very raw and true to what gameplay like that typically feels like. So do you think, I want to kind of frame this in, did this help turn the tide? Because the game knocked it out of the park last year, and then earlier this year with their story trailer, everyone's like, oh, they made the character ugly, and that's all anybody would talk about, and it got all these downvotes. And then this, to me, and there's two different gameplay videos they released. I actually think this really re-cemented my interest in this game.
I mean, I never lost interest, but yeah, absolutely. It certainly made me double down. Yeah, this is one. I think it's just going to be about, do I have the $70 at the time that it comes out, or am I playing anything else? Because this is September, right? This one, Star Wars releases in September. So September, you'd already remarked, is like pretty packed. But yeah, they really showed up and like were there to say, we're not going to bungle this. This isn't going to be, just another Ubisoft game or whatever. Like, they're clearly giving this the Hogwarts Legacy treatment. Like, they're trying to give this the love, care, and attention to detail that Star Wars deserves, and that they clearly, feel and believe Star Wars deserves, and are internalizing that and baking that into the development process. And like, this game just looks so good. Like, the only things that I could really say is like the combat like looked a little goofy, but like the gunplay in like games like Red Dead Redemption 2 is like a tiny bit wonky, and I don't think that detracts from that game either. So I don't know that I'm gonna be like, oh my gosh, the gunplay isn't as tight as like the best third-person shooters I've ever played. I think I'm gonna be like, I'm a scoundrel, smuggler in Star Wars, and I'm having a blast like that. Like, I feel like this game is gonna. I keep comparing it to Hogwarts Legacy because I feel like it's gonna be that childhood wonder feeling of like, I am in this world, like I am this character that I've always wanted to be. I get to fly around and fight the Empire and do these heists and be a smuggler and talk to Jabba the Hutt and cut these deals. Dude, when they got into the faction system and how you could like appeal to like one or the other and like barter and bribe and like all that stuff, I'm like, okay, like this is not just the average, cookie cutter, we just want to churn a game out to make some money off of this IP. Like, they're really putting so much effort into this. Like, when they first booted up the footage, and it was the bounties that you could pick, and it was like you get rewards and like abilities or whatever, you get like something out of each one.
Yeah,
that, like,
investing
changes how you play. That's so cool.
Yeah, investing in those individual people will yield you different skills. Like, she had different things she could do in a shootout if she was did stuff for this one guy. So I like that, because that's sort of taking the idea and sort of the mythos of being a scoundrel, and how she would learn, different tricks of the trade and different things from engaging with a guy who's like a gunslinger, or engaging somebody who's like, here's how you get away from Imperial scans. Those are the type of things I think that'll make the game feel like the RPG of a scoundrel in Star Wars, and less of just like this point and click adventure where go here and clear this outpost. You will be able to, they said, go full scoundrel if you want. So that's, I think, why or how they're having you do that. Now, I will say, this does need to be said, Ubisoft has no clue how to live stream. Somebody needs to educate them on how to set your bit rate to a respectable bit rate. They probably need to do some more encoding in their streaming software before hitting the ingest servers because the quality of the stream was terrible. It was the same thing last year. It's like when Avatar was on screen or when this game was on screen, it's like, I know these games are good looking and they look just awful. And then you go back and watch the 4K videos later and it looks like a different game. So somebody needs to help them with their stream quality because they really hurt their presentation by doing that. There is some graphical funkiness. What's that?
Do you think it has anything to do with them doing it live, like old E3 style? Because nobody else is doing that, right?
Yeah, I mean, Xbox's was all pre-recorded, so maybe they should consider doing that as well, you know, because then you can have a much... Like, when I saw the 4K stream and, like, Phil Spencer's, like, filling up my monitor, I was like, oh, my gosh, I can see the pores in his skin. Like, man, you're looking pretty good, Phil. Like, but there is some graphical funkiness, especially in this scene coming up where, like, the light comes through the door, so I'm hoping they can kind of polish some of that out. I thought it was YouTube. I thought it was the compression. But even at 4K, when she's like, oh, man, and like the light comes through the door, there's like a lens flare.
Like a lens flare thing, yeah.
It looks really bad. So I hope they can polish it. We did send everybody over to Detective Seeds right here. That just looks terrible. We sent everybody over to Detective Seeds preview. So, guys, be sure to check that out. He's in chat. A lot of people got their hands on the previews, and the reception seems to be pretty positive. Have you checked any of the previews out?
I haven't, other than just I did check out Detective Seeds and I checked out Greg Miller like very briefly. He was just talking about it basically, and both of them are like, it's, you know, what I played of it's fantastic. I want to play more. You know, Greg basically said like I love Star Wars. I love Starfield. Starfield was my game of the year last year. It's hard to defend, you know, all the people saying that like, oh, like you can't do that in Starfield, you can't do that in Starfield, like as far as the space travel and movement and everything, the fluidity of just being on a planet. He said like, I don't know if they just gave me like a finite slice of the game that was very curated in the way that Ubisoft has done in the past to play, you know, and I basically got like the Galaxy's Edge, you know, bar or whatever, you know, that outpost or whatever. That's like, he said, but like it was just like bustling with NPCs. I walked by and they're talking about, you know, the card game that they were playing. He said he ran into an NPC and the NPC was like, oh, you know, if I just had a few more credits, I could get all my money back, or, you know, whatever, because he'd bet it all and lost it, you know. And you get to talk to him and you had the option of like, give him like 1 credit, give him a handful of credits, or give him like everything you have or whatever. And Greg said he was like, well, screw it, I'm only here for like, you know, 20 minutes. I'll just give him everything I have. And he was like, oh, I thank you so much. Like, you'll see, I'll win it all back and more. Like, come back and see me. And he's like, that's so cool. Like, I don't know what's gonna happen when I come back and see that guy, but like, is he gonna be like rich and like have like different clothes and you know, like what's gonna happen? Like, I don't. Is he gonna lose it all? Like, just the fact that all that's in there and it's not just like meaningless NPC interactions. Like, that sounds very, very promising. You know, I hope it's not kind of like I would call it the Ubisoft veneer. Like, I've definitely fallen victim as a lover of Ubisoft games to like the Ubisoft veneer of like, we see, you know, at E3 when they show these games off, like what the game is capable of, and it's like the game has a version of that, but it's not as authentic and integral to the game as like they might have portrayed it to be. Like, it's like, okay, there's a version of that, but it's not really as like, I guess, like organic or whatever as like you might have hoped or expected. And so like, I hope that that's not what's happening here. I do kind of think that they've leveled up their game. Like, they went through a rough patch. I think we've disagreed on that in the past. Like, I do think that they struggled for a while, like ever since around the time that they were releasing Ghost Recon Breakpoint and Watch Dogs Legion and Riders Republic. Like, they went through a bit of a point where like nobody was really on board with their games. They weren't really commercially successful. I think they're back in a big way. I think that they, you know, they doubled down on like trying to figure out, okay, what is our identity? What is our selling point in terms of like the games that we're going to make? What's going to draw people to them? And I think you're right. Like, I think they realized that like these 2 games are a big deal. We need to put all our effort behind it. Like, the success of Valhalla showed them, hey, you don't need 8 games at a time that are highly successful. Sure, you can have a Skull and Bones, you can have a Rainbow Six Siege, you can have a For Honor with those communities that love the game, that keep engaging with it. Give them their content, continue to work on the game, continue to engage with that community. But like, that can just be what it is, and that's a boon to you as well. You need your big hitters to hit, or there is no Ubisoft, basically, at least not in the mind share of like the gamer audience. And so I think they've realized, like, if these two games are a knockout, like, we're back, like, we're as big as anybody in the conversation. And like, I wouldn't bet against either of these two being on the Game of the Year nomination list at the end of the year. But based on what we've seen right now, again, they could be showing them very well. They could be, you know, kind of giving us like a veneer kind of look of like what this game is going to be. And in reality, it's like, well, yeah, like, you do interact with NPCs that way, but it's like dime a dozen, you know, that one interaction was like specific for that early part of the game or whatever it is. Or you don't, you know, we haven't talked about Assassin's Creed yet, but you don't actually get to pick between Yasuke or Naoe like every time. Like, that was just one mission, or, you know, you don't really have that much choice, or how you want to approach like different missions, like stealthily or not. Like, you kind of just get funneled into one way or another. It could be like that. Like, we don't know. But as far as like the potential that they're showing off, they seem to get it. Like, they seem to understand what would be a flex in terms of like how they design these games. And they're saying, yes, we have done that. We've made sure to craft this game in that way so that you're going to enjoy it for those elements.
I also like the fan service. I know some of it's fan service, especially when they go to Mos Eisley. I'm like, okay, like, this is great. I don't care. I love the hangars and the stormtroopers and all the scenes and the scenery and the locations that are iconic. I mean, even this section right here where, you know, they're showing the different places that she's going to be fighting in outer space. Like, it's almost like they're trying to show you all the different biomes. I think the game really looks great. If it's got that Avatar touch of a lush, you know, very good looking open world for each of the planets that you go to, I really do think this game has a lot of promise. And I also think there's a lot to do. I like that they're showing that you can invest in different reputations if you want, and that's going to affect how things play out. You can decide to, in the one scene, she decides to shoot the guy instead of, you know, trying to negotiate or continue or whatever. It's like, no, she decides, no, I'm going to kill you. And I think that level of freedom also, I think, is going to help it, because, you know, Seed said in the chat he wants to, you know, dive back in. It gave him that feeling of, yeah, I want to keep playing. I saw Skill Up's preview this morning. He seemed to be impressed by it and seemed to have had a good time. And so I liked the idea of, we're going to deep dive. We're going to show you extensive looks at these individual games. And to me, if you were trepidatious or worried about Ubisoft, this to me was a sign of strength and confidence from them. They're confident that these games are good because they're letting you see a ton. In the past, we saw very curated vertical slices that were, you know, heavily rendered and like all this post-processing to make them look extra awesome. That's not what this felt like. This felt very raw and honest. Like, they're letting you see how long it takes to land on a planet. They're letting you see the dogfights. They're letting you see some of the clumsy shooting and how she's not always going to be like, you know, nailing her shots. And I feel like they're letting us see the rough edges. And that, to me, it gives me confidence in the game being good and genuine. Like, I don't feel like they're trying to pull the wool over our eyes, which we know that is something that has not just happened with Ubisoft in the past, but it's happened with a lot of games. And I think I remember when Jedi Survivor came out and there were performance issues, it really irritated me because the media were like giving it 9s and 10s. So I just hope I think that's my only lingering concern here. I see a game with depth and size and fun, and it seems like it's going to be a good treatment of the Star Wars universe. That's my only lingering concern then, is I hope it nails performance and doesn't have issues running well, like with frame rate and with fidelity.
Yeah, I will say, I'm pretty sure, like, especially in the current generation, Ubisoft usually provides like a graphics and a performance mode. So at the very least, hopefully we can get like a dynamic resolution 60 FPS mode. I don't think that Ubisoft has really ever been a developer that's super concerned about, you know, the graphical fidelity in the way that some of these developers we've been talking about through the course of the first half of this year are like not willing to compromise on that. And even Starfield last year, you know, like, we have a vision for how we want this to look fidelity wise. We're not willing to compromise that, so you can't really have your 60 FPS. I don't really know that Ubisoft has ever really been like that. I think they'd be like, I mean, hey, if you want to play the game at 920p or whatever, that's fine. Like, I don't know that they've ever really stuck a pole in the sand and said, no, but you're going to have to play it this way. So I would be surprised if we had serious performance issues. Like we might see like, oh, it's 52, 57, it's not 60, but I wouldn't expect anything more serious than that.
Yeah, I'm not actually concerned from what we've seen. It seems like they've done a good job of making the game run well in the open areas. I'm seeing, and somebody says it's not going to look as good as Avatar. No. I agree. I don't think that the aim of this game is to look as graphically impressive as Avatar, but Avatar did such a wonderful job of creating the world of Pandora so that I got to experience it. Like, I think that is one of the best looking games that we've received this gen. And I think as long as they make this look and feel like Star Wars, that's what I want. Like if it's a lush planet or a desert planet, whatever it is, that it just looks good. I don't think you're going to hit the fidelity of Avatar. I just thought Avatar looked so excellent, and I'm hoping this can land in a similar place. And I could see them adding content.
Speaking of Avatar, like, I mean, I haven't played that game. You're like one of its biggest advocates, I feel like, that I've heard at least. For that people are sleeping on how good that game is, how underrated it is. I liked what they showed. I thought it looked cool.
Yes and no. Avatar looked great and it played great, but I do agree with people that they needed to add more, I think, unique gameplay, because I do want to go back and finish it. It's in the backlog. I think it would have drawn me back a lot stronger if there was more unique gameplay, because I know it is very much Far Cry. And originally I defended that. I don't think that warrants the low scores, but I do think it warrants the criticism of, like, it doesn't really have a hook. Like, I went back into Lies of P, and now I'm kind of in. I'm like, oh, I gotta play this game. I gotta finish this game. And I feel like if I went back to Avatar, I don't know if that would happen, because like I was hunting an animal and I couldn't get the piece to drop that I needed, and I was like, this is all of the things that made Far Cry kind of annoying and tedious. Like the smallest gameplay loop becomes tedium, and it doesn't need to be. It's like, this is silly. Like, I'm just trying to get this thing to level up this thing. It doesn't need to be that elaborate. But I've always said it is one of the best looking games, because that, I think you can't take that away from Avatar. So I want to be careful in my endorsement of that game, because I definitely didn't go back and finish it because other games came out, and it was like that game didn't have the magnetism. It didn't pull me back in when other games started taking center stage, like Stellar Blade or Ronin. So I want to move on to Star Wars, though. I'm sorry, Assassin's Creed. Go ahead.
I think that one, like, I'm just glad to see, that they're doing season pass content for that. Like, we've had games like decide not to. We've had Redfall decide not to. So like, I'm glad that they're sticking to that. They're same thing with Prince of Persia. Like, they're going to be doing DLC content for that as well. So I think that just makes the offerings of those games even better. And like Avatar is one where, if they're going to have 2 full-fledged expansions for that game, it's going to be much more tempting come Black Friday time for me to pick up the Ultimate Edition or whatever for $50 or whatever it's going to be priced at, and get all that content in that one game experience. And it looks like that. I think that's smart for them. Continue supporting your games that you worked really hard on. Same thing goes for Skull and Bones. Keep telling me that you're going to be bringing more and more content to that game. Apparently, I'm going to get to fight a flying dragon or something as a boat. So that's it's a pretty good way to be a boat, Lono, is fight a flying dragon as a boat.
Yeah, I will say this. I love that Prince of Persia, The Lost Crown. I love that it had a huge inclusion and that they're doing all that content. That game deserves so much praise. And if you watch, they did this great showcase of the combat. I would say for a Metroidvania with good platforming and melee combat, it has one of the deepest combat systems of a game like that. There's just so much you can do, so many things you can string together. That's one of my favorite games that has come out this year. I've not praised a Metroidvania this much since probably Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and it's up there with those games. I keep telling people, like, please give that game a shot. It's really, really good. And I think a lot of people just overlooked it because they're like, oh, it's a side-scroller. And they did have the teaser of, Sands of Time. I thought that was great. They're confirming not only that it's being made, but that we have to wait 2 years. I have people getting upset that it's 2 years away. I'm like, okay, wait. Everybody was crying that they wanted the return of E3, where they would show you a game that wouldn't come out for 5 years, and you're mad about 2 years? Like, what's the problem here?
They're implicitly restarting the entire development of that game. Like, that's what everybody is. Everybody that's in the know, like, that's like a Prince of Persia super fan that was concerned about the way that Sand of Time remake looked when they first showed it off. That's where they're getting from this trailer, is like, Ubisoft is speaking directly to them and saying, hey, don't worry, we get it. We weren't going in the right direction with this. We're course correcting. It's a ways off now because we got to restart. But
Right.
look at kind of the tone of this. Look at the art direction of this. This is not the same. We're not going to keep going down that path. Don't worry. Like, just give us time. We're going to do this property justice. And so, like, yeah, like that's the whole point of the announcement is to say we have nothing because we're not going to mess this up. We're not going to F this up. We were close. You saw that footage, and then it went through development hell, and there were reports that we might shut it down. It's still happening. We're starting over from scratch. We're going a different direction with it. So it's kind of meant to reinstill that confidence, at least in the concept of them remaking that classic game.
Yeah, yeah. And I think 2 years is fine. I don't think that's that's pretty.
I think 3 years would be fine, honestly. Like I mean that's like beyond good and evil, basically. Like if that game comes out, it's like, magical, like whatever. One final shout out before we move on to the probably the main game that you and I want to talk about. Crew Motorfest, it's great that they've done a year of content. They're going to do another full year of content, and I avidly believe that is the best racing game out right now, not called Forza Horizon 5. Like it's a great game. It's available on all platforms and not just Xbox and PC. So great to see them continue to support that game, and I'm glad that they finally kind of nailed that formula as like a Forza Horizon like. I don't think that the Crew 1 or 2 really hit in that way, and I think that people are starting to wake up to the fact that like, oh, Ubisoft is in that game. Like they're up there with the Need for Speeds and the Forza Horizons, and maybe even a little bit better than Need for Speed and competing with Forza Horizon. So it's good to see that. It's good to see that game's going to get a whole another year of content. When we have games like Suicide Squad, where we're like, is this going to get a full year of content? Like we don't necessarily know. So it's good to see that game is thriving, in its own kind of space.
Yeah, when those trailers come on, I typically look down and try to I try to catch up on my Twitter feed or send out a tweet. I'm trying to like live stream, live react, live chat, as well as like, try to put something on Twitter if I'm reacting to something that's happened. So when that came on, I just looked down because I'm like, this isn't for me. That's fine. It's not for me. It's for the people that like those games. But that was one I didn't pay attention to, so I'm happy to have you speak to it. But I think the center stage, it's on the thumbnail. Let's talk Assassin's Creed Shadows, because
absolutely.
I am absolutely thrilled with the direction they have taken here. I love it. I love how both characters are vastly different. I love how they're not shying away from the fact that Yasuke is completely standing out. He's not just tall. He's black. He's not Asian. So like they make mention of it here in this NPC interaction. I think that's a cool element to his character, that they're making it like, yeah, he doesn't belong here from a visual standpoint, but he's here to do justice for the people. Like he says that to the one guy that he's fighting. He's like, for the people, I am justice, which I like. I think I'll probably play this with the Japanese voice actors. I always feel like I liked that in Ronin and Tsushima when I did that. It feels good and authentic, but I understand people that don't want to read subtitles. So I have zero issues with everything I've watched. I've watched it back multiple times, whether he's using his big spike club or his katana. Let's just talk about Yasuke first, because that's what we got on screen, and then we'll talk about Naoe. So what did you think of how they showed him, walking around, interacting with NPCs, and then obviously the combat?
My first impression of this, and I think I was in your chat, like, talking about this with you. First off, obviously the Shiba petting must be a cultural thing, because that's definitely in Rise of the Ronin and other games that Koei Tecmo has made. So
I pointed that out, and people said that Shibas are considered like they're revered in that part of the world. So,
but it's also like it's an element across multiple game franchises. Not just Assassin's Creed and Ronin. So that to me says like, oh, like they did their homework. Like they are allowing Eastern-made games, games not made in the West, to kind of influence their process here. And I love to see that, because my initial impression of this gameplay segment was, this does not look like an Assassin's Creed game that I have ever played. And I've played quite a few Assassin's Creed games. That really the only one that I haven't played recently is Valhalla. So, but I've seen a lot of Valhalla gameplay, and I don't think that this reminds me too much of Valhalla. Like it seems to be kind of like its own thing, and that's kind of like a running theme for like the entirety of the gameplay that we saw. It seemed like a hybrid, especially like in the interactions between the two characters, Naoe and Yasuke, and then their interactions with the NPCs, their kind of gameplay interactions, like what they're doing. Like it didn't feel quite as open worldy, like go wherever, do whatever. It felt like more focused, I guess. And so like all of that seems like they're taking like what worked for the Mirage style of games or the Ezio trilogy style of games and maybe incorporating that into the Valhalla Odyssey type game. They're also incorporating influences from games like Rise of the Ronin, Ghost of Tsushima, maybe even some Sekiro, honestly, especially with the Naoe gameplay. Some people were calling out Tenchu. Like I love to see all of these influences on a Ubisoft game when Ubisoft has been criticized far and away, maybe more than any other developer, of kind of making these redundantly styled games. You were just talking about Avatar being kind of like a carbon copy of Far Cry and that being the biggest criticism. This to me doesn't feel like any Assassin's Creed that I played very recently. And I love that. I love that the combat, like you were commenting on stream, feels so unique, feels so heavy and weighty and brutal. It's almost a little bit kind of like a For Honor character, the way he's swinging that weapon, and it's crunching with impact, like when he's connecting with the enemies. I love that they are just not willing to just make another copy of the same game that they've made, set it in this part of history in Japan. Like clearly there's so much attention here to trying to evolve and incorporate new and existing ideas that they haven't utilized before in a very effective and fun way for a better gameplay experience. And like just this combat looks so visceral. Like it's gonna affect you like when you have the controller in your hands. It affects you when you're watching it, right? Like your jaw was like almost on the floor. Like you were like, this is brutish. Like this is visceral what I'm looking at, and I love it.
Well, which is well timed how you said visceral, because even once he gets his katana out, he like lifts the guy in the air and like tosses him to the side. So people are like, yeah, it really looks like Tsushima. I'm like, dude, I have played a ridiculous amount of hours in Tsushima. It's one of my all-time favorite games, and I see a very different approach to katana gameplay. I understand there's going to be similarities. It's unavoidable. Like, you're going to notice things that you might have done in Ronin or maybe you did in Tsushima, but the parries especially, they don't feel as... I want to say they don't feel as pronounced. They're quicker and they're a little bit like more go right into the next thing. And a lot of the times the parries in Tsushima, I feel like were a little bit more pronounced, and you're really focusing on stance changes. So I want to see, you know, what kind of abilities he has with the katana, because obviously the insane level of weight behind the opening combat, I think really made me think, okay, you have to be very intentional and tactical in this. You can't just go charging in, because how long some of those swings are, you could get surrounded and probably get ripped up pretty good. Now, I want to talk about Naoe, because I do feel like, you know, they introduce her, and one of the things I love with the way they introduce her is the sheer size difference between them. Like, when you choose who to play as, she really pronounces his almost giant form, and they've got that as he's walking through the streets as well. Somebody asked, you know, would you typically bow to samurai? I think they treated Jin that way in Tsushima. They would refer to him as like a lord and stuff. They were revered and very respected, so he would be treated that way, you know, donning that armor. So I'm not sure how often they're going to give you this decision, because I do wonder, is this going to be one of the pitfalls of the game, is people are going to say, I really prefer to play as Naoe because she's so assassin-oriented and light and fast and stealthy, and they're not going to want to play as the brute. I mean, he's like a refrigerator. He kind of
very
turns.
Different.
He turns slowly and everything. Do you think that's going to be a potential turnoff? Like, talk about her gameplay a little bit, but also, if people really gravitate toward her, are they going to get frustrated when they have to play as the big guy who's a little bit slower?
I would like to think that this kind of choice thing that they did was for show. This is complete speculation on my part, but Ubisoft does this type of stuff in their shows. Complete speculation, I think that maybe that choice thing, it may not be, it may be in the actual game, is for show to demonstrate that you can pick between either one. I would actually expect to see something a little more in line with Assassin's Creed Syndicate, where you basically could just play as whichever protagonist you wanted for whatever extended period of time you wanted to.
Okay.
There were some exceptions where you needed to play as Jacob Fry or Evie Fry for specific missions, but like that game demonstrated a tremendous commitment to kind of like what they're evolving here of like you can commit to whatever playstyle that you want to. And Evie was very much more the classic assassin. She had the hood, she had the cloak, she would sneak into certain places. She used like a cane weapon. And Jacob was just kind of the brutish guy that was like, all right, come on then, lads. And he would just like punch like 5 guys at once. And you could do either playstyle with either of them, but like they were more suited like skill tree wise and stuff like that, and starting abilities to go one way or the other, like the way that they were kind of predisposed to. So I would love to see them kind of mirror that or bring that back and allow you to basically play as Naoe as much as you want to, or play as Yasuke as much as you want to. I suppose it would be, you know, a disappointment if that wasn't the case and you kind of got locked into playing as one or the other. I'm okay with a few odd story missions. You know, like obviously there's going to be some places she can get into that he can't. Or obviously there's going to be some things that he can do with his brute strength that she maybe can't. But I would like it if for the most part you could kind of play as whichever one you want to. And I just think like the discrepancy in the experience that you're getting. I mean, imagine this mission that we're watching now, but you play as Yasuke. Like he's probably just kicking the door in and just cleaving 2 guys and picks one up, throws them against the wall or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
That's gonna be fun too. So like, hopefully I get to play that twice, you know, or I get to, you know, like I'm hoping that they're kind of embracing the fact of like, yeah, why not? Why not do the stealth mission as Yasuke, but like not stealth at all? And then there's just like 18 dudes on you and you're like, all right, I guess we're doing that. You know, like hopefully you get that player choice to engage with it however you want to.
Well, here's the thing I love, though. You just described it as a stealth mission, but I don't think it is. I think when she plays, it almost takes on the role of a stealth mission. And because when they're deciding whether or not they should do it, they're both taking up what they think should happen. So I actually don't know if this is a stealth mission. They even said the weather's going to change. So right now they said the wind and the rain like basically masks her footsteps and she can crawl through the water and then use bamboo to breathe. And they said if you come here in the winter, that it'll be frozen over and you won't be able to go into the water like that. And then you also might be louder if you're like walking on snow instead of walking while there's wind and rain. So I think they've created something that is more dynamic to where if you play this as Yasuke, it's not going to be a stealth mission. It's going to be basically straight on combat, which, listen, I love, if they let us have that freedom, I love that because then the classic Assassin's Creed guys can do what they want. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play as Yasuke probably almost the whole time because I've never played a game with this big brute of a samurai. I've played a game where I sneak around and jump off buildings and assassinate people. I've played that game, which is why I think this was a smart choice to create. I love the stylization on the assassinations too. I just love it. The black and white. It's great. So,
dude, I love during the live when you were like, she's not going to be able to breathe under there. And then 2 seconds later, she pulls out the reed to like, to breathe underwater. And it was like, they thought of everything. Like, oh my God. That was a really great moment.
Now, we talked about this earlier. I actually want to get your feedback on it because Insomniac Black did a $2 super chat. He's kind of teasing me. He says, I'm going to play with a do-rag on. They definitely did something with the music when Yasuke was on screen. And we discussed this a little bit earlier. And I said, listen, I don't want to act like I'm going to sit here and take up for the black community. But if if I enter the mind of a black man, I would say, this feels silly that you're putting almost like hip-hop beats in the game when he's on screen. Not insulting, but maybe a little obvious overstepping of, I don't know, pandering, or it just feels unnecessary. Like with Miles Morales, it felt sensible in Spider-Man that the music changed and the vibe of the game changed because of his background, his culture, where he lived in the city.
What did IGN say? The exaggerated swagger of a young black.
Right. We don't need to quote that, but I just don't understand why they did that. Like, you're in feudal Japan. Do you think we're overstating it? Are we being too nitpicky? Or does that kind of come across as, like, why'd you guys do this?
I think that it was probably just a tone deaf thing. I can't speak to whether or not they did it specifically because the 6'8" basketball person, as Mighty Keith likes to say, was on screen.
Right.
But they did a lot of that with the marketing and even some of the cutscenes of Prince of Persia: Lost Crown, and it worked very well for them. Like, it kind of gave it a fresh type of, hip feel that really resonated with people for that game. And I thought the marketing was fantastic for Lost Crown, and especially when they first showed that game off. Like, it's like, oh, it's not the the flutes and the like the ancient style singing, or like whatever, what from the Middle East or whatever you want to call it. Like, they were very much going a different direction, and I assume that they're just trying to be cool. If I'm honest, like, I think that they just want this gameplay to land. I didn't even really notice it. Like, I just thought it was like making the moment more punchy to a degree. Like, I was like, yeah, he's like beating the crap out of these guys or whatever. I didn't even kind of do like 1+1 in my head of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I could just be naive. I could just be a white dude. Like, I don't know, but
maybe a bit of both.
Yeah, maybe a combination of things. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh god.
I would imagine that, like, I mean, these guys at Ubisoft, like, I mean, especially like last year at Ubisoft Forward, like, when you hear these guys talk on stage, like, they don't exude like complete awareness of every situation. Like, they're like, oh, our game, like, you're going to love it. Like, like, it's not like, I just think they just like, they're like, please like our game, like, please kids think we're cool.
Yeah, right.
And like, I think that's like what this is. Like, I don't know that it's like this weird racial thing that like people are making it out to be. Now, if you want to say like that's the effect of it, like, what you did was you put the hip hop music on when the black guy is beating dudes up. Okay, like, that's the overall effect, and so we can address that for what it is. Like, that's the outcome. But like, personally, like, I don't know. I just wish that people would talk about this game for what it is, which is like, this looks to me like the first time that they've been confident enough to try to do like the Unity thing again. Like, where they're like, we're really going to take what our formula is and try to push the boundaries on it. The way it looks, the way it plays, the character movement, like the way that Naoe is like climbing up and like scaling down buildings and stuff. It reminds me so much of Arno's movement in that game that they completely abandoned after that game got shredded for all the bugs at launch, and they've never picked that back up again. It looks kind of like that, the way that she moves, and I really like to see that. And the combat reminds me a lot. It doesn't remind me of Unity's combat, but it reminds me how Unity's combat was unlike any Assassin's Creed game before that. And they definitely seem to be trying to make a fairly new combat system that incorporates more of the styles of like these other games. Yeah. Whether you want to say it's Koei Tecmo or Sucker Punch or whoever, I think they're just evolving their combat system a lot to a degree that looks really cool. Like when she cuts the reeds down with whatever that weapon she's using is called.
Yeah, I love that reaction of the environment.
I hate that there's, several conversations about this game that are in line with, like you said, there's this trend of everybody wants to make everything a political discussion right now, whether it's, over sexualizing women or if it's a racial thing or whatever. If there are, people out there like Mighty Keith, for instance, who says, I didn't appreciate that, I thought it was pandering or whatever, I'm totally going to defer to that opinion and be like, okay, what can we do about that? Like, what can Ubisoft do to address that, to make sure that they're not doing that in the game itself to a degree that's like annoying or detracts from the game experience. I'm not going to tell those people to sit down if they feel that way. If they're like, hey, I'm concerned that Ubisoft might be trying to pander too much and it might be detrimental to my experience with this game. If that's the case, that's the case. I just don't know that we need to be having that conversation unless that becomes like a real issue. And like right now, I kind of am seeing people that it's not even really an issue for make it into an issue, I guess.
Well, Well, Eugene basically said he felt like it was immersion breaking, and as soon as he mentioned it, I was like, Yeah, this feels kind of like a bad decision. And I want to say, I think there are versions of that I want to describe it as a Michael Scott level of like a lack of self-awareness. Like, I think your take on it was good, that like these people probably don't even have a clue. Yeah. They're just like, hey, let's do this thing. Like I said, it kind of reminds me of the Steve Buscemi gif of like, hello, fellow kids. It's almost like, hey, we're supposed to use this kind of music, right? And it's like, no, you don't really have to do that. So like, I don't think it's a major criticism. I also worry that this is going to add fuel to the fire of the people hating on this game for racial reasons. And it's like, that just adds more fuel to that, to be like, look how cheesy and corny y'all are being. You got this guy in here, and then you got to make, you know, him walking around to hip-hop music. So it's like, to me, I'm more concerned that it's going to be weaponized as criticism from that particular group that I'm kind of tired of hearing from, because I think this looks good.
It could also be a failed attempt at like showing, like trying to appreciate black culture. Like it could be the Miles Morales thing. Like they could be trying to celebrate the fact that he is of a different heritage and sort of like have this melting pot type of feel of like, yes, he is authentically Japanese, but he is also like authentically of African descent. And so they're trying to like pay some sort of mild homage to that or whatever. I don't know. I mean, like whatever it was, it seems like it's going to be a miss. And that's okay. Like, I think that these publishers are allowed to miss in their presentation sometimes, as long as they like learn from it and they're like, okay, people didn't like that. Here's the criticism for it. Here's why. You know, let's listen to that. Maybe let's not listen to the crowd of people that are just trying to yell at us about anything. But if there's a genuine like concern about like, hey, the reason that we are reacting to this is like, we want to make sure that you're not going to do X, Y, Z, which would be bad. Like, we don't want to see you do this. We want the game to be good. We want the experience to be good for everybody. And so we want to make sure that you're not doing anything that detracts from that. As long as they hear that part and incorporate that, I think that everything will be okay. I just hope there's not like a raucous crowd of people that just want to be angry about something that, you know, can sort of drown out what really looks like what's going to be one of the best games of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think this game's going to do quite well. I think it's going to score well. I think it's going to have good reception. And I think it's better sometimes to speak to something like this and say this is a very minor issue, because it will likely be something that people bring up and make an issue out of. And someone in chat's been saying like they're sort of channeling music styles that have shown up in certain anime, and like maybe that's what they were going for. I think because this is going for more of like, here's a historical location, here's a historical person, it probably would have been better from an artistic decision. This is just my opinion. I don't think this is a huge deal, but if I was in the room, I would say I think we should just go for more of a traditional style music for the game, and not something that sort of modern days that character. Like Yasuke is this historical character. They're referencing the samurai that he served when they introduced him in the showcase, which I thought was really cool, that they kind of grounded him in that history to maybe silence all these morons who suddenly became, you know, historians overnight.
Experts,
yeah. They're suddenly historians. I thought that was cool, but then I think that's just an art direction choice that I would have said, maybe don't do that. And I think it's important to say that's not a deal breaker. It's a minor issue. I think it's more of a lack of self-awareness than something sinister, or pandering is kind of the only word we have, you know, because Eugene's like, it's not pandering. It's just like, you know, what old white guys think young people want to listen to. And it's like, but even that's a version of pandering, almost like, well, this is what people like to listen to, right? And it's like, it just doesn't really fit into the game. So I did want to just make mention of that, because we had that discussion this morning. So I was kind of curious what your thoughts on it were, because when I think of Tsushima, there's every element immerses you into that place: the tall grass, the wind, the music, the way they have the words come up on the screen when you start or finish a mission. Like, there's something about that art direction that creates this full package, and that music did feel out of place for the package that we saw.
Yeah. Dude, speaking of words on the screen, something that we didn't talk about, again, with Ubisoft maybe trying to level up their like Sandbox game, we talked about with Star Wars Outlaws, you know, the level of interaction that you have with Kay, and the ability to maybe pick which faction you want to interact with, go after a particular bounty for the reward that you're going to get for that for your gameplay style. I loved seeing like the classic Assassin's Creed, the OG Assassin's Creed in the Middle East component of like on the left side of the screen, like he wears this, he's in this part of the town during the daytime, he likes to eat whatever, whatever these facts are, so you can hunt down your target. We didn't really get to see how that influenced the gameplay because like we were just kind of on rails, like we just kind of went to where we needed to go and killed the guy. But like I didn't see any like Hitman style, like, okay, that's the target, like there he is, or like what, like nothing like in it. Like it seemed like the person playing the game knew as a developer, okay, he's on the other side of this pond, I'm gonna go under the pond and use the reed and then jump up and slit his throat or whatever. But like we didn't see anything in the HUD or on screen that was like, there he is, go kill him, like. And I love that like maybe as the player you're having to use your own brain and be like, oh, it's him, isn't it? Okay, I can sneak around and like whatever, based on the information that you may have gathered or whatever. I would have liked them to get more into that, but I know that like that probably wouldn't have shown super well if they're like, now here's the investigation process or like whatever. But like, I don't know if you played the original Assassin's Creed, but like that's literally what you would do. Like you would spend a prelude or like a preliminary period with each target where you would go talk to like informants, or you would watch like a certain space or eavesdrop or whatever. You'd figure out everything you need to know about your target. You'd figure out when you can strike, and then you would do it. And Unity kind of expanded on that and tried to do like some more Hitman style missions where like there's the one that's very famous from that game because it's in the Church of Notre Dame, which they ended up using to help repair that church when it had the fire. But you need to go into a church and like assassinate a priest or somebody of the clergy that works in that church, and like you could just like run in and kill them, or you could hide in the confessional. Like there were multiple different ways that, there was a way to get the key, there was a way to break in. So like to think that they might be doing that, and the duality of like, oh, I'm just gonna be Yasuke and just like be like, I'm here MFers and kill everybody, or I'm Naoe and nobody's even gonna know I was here except for the like 5 guards that are unlucky enough to be guarding my target, and I'm gonna cleave them with the swingy thing or whatever. Like that's so cool to think like that might be the depth of like how much of an assassination game this is gonna be again if you choose to engage with it that way. Like Assassin's Creed, like the name hasn't really meant anything to the franchise for a while. It's kind of just been like Wisher adjacent RPG game, insert here, with like cool setting and cool characters. The fact that they might be going back to that and it might be a true assassin game, it's something I'm very excited about.
Yeah, the timing there was unfortunate. Kirk says that, and then the trailer literally zooms in on the target's name. Yeah, but he got to proximity and then it did that. Like I think Kirk's point was, they didn't
well, then
tell
I'm just wrong then. If
No. Kirk's point was they didn't tell you he's over here and then you just go over there. Like his point was they're not doing that. Yes, once you get within proximity and you get eyes on him, they do the cool stylized zoom in, like there he is. So yeah, I think that element of the game looked better. It definitely felt like they were trying to tone down some of the UI. It felt like they were trying to tone down some of the like, it's just gonna feel like, oh, it's just there's stuff all over the screen. It's like, no, you go to the town, you talk to this person, and then you need to like go and find him, and he's somewhere in the town.
The HUD did seem less busy for recent Assassin's Creed games, though, didn't it? Like it almost felt like I wouldn't need to play no HUD if I wanted it to be immersive. Like it felt kind of minimalistic to a degree, I think. But
I hope it stays that way. I mean, he comes into town here, he's got a radar, and once he has the mission, it has the points up on the left-hand screen, which, somebody may or may not want that. So, I would like to see more games allow you to strip down HUD if you want to, or to minimize it, because I think this experience right here is, I think, what you want to have. You want to have this sort of walk into town, everybody's kind of reacting to him, they're all bowing. I think that's nice. I think that makes it, that gives you a sense of presence in the world, and not like the AI are just sort of like on their train tracks of movement and they ignore you. And I want to see, even when they showed the map, like I want to kind of skip ahead to that. I can't remember where that happened. I want to skip to the map because I think that's after the fight. I want to see just how dense that map is with like icons, because that's always been a major complaint from people. Yeah, here it is. It's in this section when they're talking. Like, yeah, this to me, I mean, I don't know. It looks like you're not going to have this, insane amount of, I don't know, maybe like icons everywhere. I hope it's more stripped down and not as bloated. There's obviously the possibility that this kind of transcends into live service ongoing the way Valhalla did, and they add things later. That's also possible.
I think like we're getting spoiled with this game. Like, I think we played Ronin and we both liked it, but we were hungry for more. And I think eventually what you want, right, is Ghost of Tsushima 2. But from what I've seen of Ghost of Tsushima, unfortunately I haven't played it yet. It's just one of those that I haven't gotten the time to get around to, which I wasn't very sad about when I played Ronin, because it's like, okay, I'm not ruining this game for myself. I'm kind of happy about that. This game looks better. I don't know. It looks better to me. And that's, as somebody who has not played Ghost, 100%, I will wear that on my sleeve. I don't know. I really don't know, because I have not played it, and I am a firm believer in, if you haven't played it, you can't critique it. But I haven't played this game either, and just like looking at the combat, it looks more fluid, it looks less stilted. I love how, as you've remarked multiple times, Yasuke, like, his combat looks so visceral and like real, like impactful in a real way, where I don't know, but it like does something to your brain. Like when you hear the crunch of his I don't know what the name of that traditional weapon is, but that club hit the armor of the enemy people that he's fighting, like there's something in your brain that is like being tricked into thinking like that's really happening in front of me. Like the way that it looks, the impact of it is just phenomenal on a different level, and I think that's going to be very fun to play just as a video game. And then the same thing for Naoe, like her movement and the sliding and the hiding and the crawling, like that's going to be fantastic as well for stealth gameplay. Like I think you were like almost giddy like a kid, like watching it live. Like you were like, stealth is back, baby, like in a big way.
Yeah, when she took the corners and climbed up and hid, like it felt like this is going to make the people who want to return to stealth happy. It felt like a return to form, but it did feel, brought up to a more modern expression of that. So it felt like you did have more freedom. But, she's crawling in grass, she's crawling in water and using bamboo to breathe. And, like, again, taking the corner and, like, peering around the corner. I think that should hopefully make those people very happy. Now, I do want to say they did speak specifically to Star Wars Outlaws. You're not going to have to, like, climb a tower to show stuff on the map. I don't know if they specifically spoken to that for AC Shadows, because I do know people get tired of that. So maybe
I wouldn't necessarily be that mad if you did, but whatever. I guess that's I've been playing Assassin's Creed games since all the way back when we had young Ezio, so that's not really something that spurns me off from it. When you start having to do it in like Far Cry and stuff like that, I'm like, okay, like let's settle down.
Well, like at least it makes sense in Assassin's Creed, but I think the challenge in this game is going to be, anytime you do that, you're gonna have to do it as Naoe. Like Yasuke ain't climbing a building.
Hey, you don't tell Yasuke that you can't climb that building.
I don't think, when I watch American Ninja Warrior, right, the people that climb all the stuff, they're not built like him. Those big guys have a hard time climbing stuff. They're just too heavy. So I don't know if they would want to have you do that.
Person.
Yeah, because we got to have Mighty Keith on one of these episodes. We quote him now. The 6'2" basketball person is just, that was such a good line. Guys, if you're enjoying the show, take a quick second. There's 400 of you here, man. Smash that like button. It helps this video find more folks. If you're enjoying the show, that's a real easy way to support this video. I do want to share some thoughts on what we heard from The Division 2. Now, this was afterward, but I get on the phone with my producer, big Division fan, and he's like, they're doing seasonal characters. I can't believe they're doing this. And I'm like, that's probably one of the only ways you'd get me to come back to this game at this point, is to give me something more disposable and more accessible and more approachable. And I think this is a sign that they're putting this game on coast mode so they can start working on Div 3. And the only way you're going to feed a community content at this point and also move to the other game is you almost have to do that. You have to do the very easy, repeatable seasonal character content where you make a person, grind the season, and then that's it. You don't get to use your existing character. What are your thoughts on that? That's what they're transitioning to. That's what they kind of announced. It was not included in Ubi Forward, and I think that's why. I think they only wanted to bring like new games, new content. This was very much from the opinion of the Division community. This was very much a disappointing announcement that they went with.
Yeah, so I'm confused. Are we talking about this as a good thing, or we're talking about, like, when you say creature, it's like, I can't believe that they were doing this. Is that dismay? Because I know that like people were like pretty upset about this with Diablo 4, and this is something that Diablo has done all the way back through, I think, 2. So it was more that people were like, well, it's more mainstream now, so they were hoping that they weren't going to do it. But a lot of people were saying that as new Diablo players that were new to Diablo 4 and really liked it, one of the biggest detractors for them was like, well, then when Season 1 started after they got in at launch, they couldn't use their character anymore, so they bounced off and they played other games. And so, like, I would imagine that something similar would happen here, especially when, like, Division 2 is not, like, a super hype or, like, full steam ahead type of game right now. I mean, obviously, it's like those other games that I mentioned, For Honor and Riders Republic. It's probably a little bit bigger than those, but it's going to have its community. I would think that this would not be something that would be popular that you have. I mean, I guess it's kind of like a challenge before the new game, or I guess I'm seeking clarification on that. Is this something that they're reacting to positively or overwhelmingly negatively?
It's pretty negative. I mean, Creature's in chat, and he's like, he has a 3,700 hour character, and he can't play the new content with that character. He's got to make a seasoned character, and that, I told him, I said, that's honestly one of the only ways you're going to get me to come back to the game right now. There's too much time has passed.
Oh,
and
okay.
I feel like I could come back and make a character and play. And the hardcore characters or the long-standing players or whatever, they're like, what the heck is this? And I think, again, this is what I said to him. The mistake was calling it Season 2.0. When people hear 2.0, that's kind of synonymous now with like a turning point in a game. Like, oh, it's really going to turn. It's really going to get crazy. So I think calling it Season 2.0, people were thinking, oh, they're really going to revamp Seasons. And what they did is they're putting the car in neutral and letting it coast because they've got to shift away from this game. So I kind of got what I wanted. I said before this, I wanted Div 3. It's time to move away from Div 2. And to me, they've communicated that's what they're doing, and maybe they could have been a little more frank about it, but I don't know how else you interpret this other than they've got to put the game into coast mode where they're not going to support it nearly as much.
So why do you think it's going in? What's the correlation there between coast mode or focusing on Division 3 and the seasonal character model?
It's a very hands-off approach. You're not really making very robust new content. The content is you create a new character and you level. Like, that's
okay. So it's not like Diablo 4 where they have a bespoke season with all this content to engage with a new character, and then you have to recycle, repeat with the next season. Like, it's kind of just the same gameplay loop that you've been doing.
I mean, I could be being presumptive, but that's how I interpret seasonal characters. I interpret that as lower effort from the devs to enable the game to offer thinner, I consider that thinner content. Like, most of the content then gets thinned out whenever a game does this. I could be wrong, but it's not being received very well, and I think it's because people know this is going to be low effort. This is going to be, more about, you reboot your character.
I mean, I think it's a terrible move, honestly, from what you're describing to me, because like I hope this isn't like a direct challenge to you or anything, but like I don't believe that you'll play the Division 2. And like I think that that's emblematic of the fact that like if they're doing it so someone like you will maybe consider going and playing it, that's the wrong move, because someone like Creature is going to keep playing it if you don't do this move. And so like it goes against the whole like mission statement, I guess, around what I was talking about earlier with For Honor, with the crew, with Riders Republic, with Rainbow Six, where they have these loyal player bases that they know that they can hold on to as long as they treat them well and continue to do updates and continue to deliver on the promise of that specific game. without trying to have it have this like broad ranging appeal that it just isn't going to reach. And this almost seems like, I don't know, over ambitious on their part to try to draw in an audience that does not care unless you slap a 3 on that name. And I don't think that that's very smart of them to do that. I think maybe Destiny could have like done something like this, maybe like, but they knew they didn't have to because they were going to get people interested in Final Shape anyway. So why even do that? Why spurn the existing player base that's been playing during the monotonous and like less interesting seasons now that this like flagship content is coming? So I don't know what the goal of this is. I don't know what they would be trying to accomplish, because I would think that the amount of player base that they would gain would be minimal, and the amount of player base that they stand to lose is actually probably much higher.
People in chat are saying that they said each season will be a new sandbox, and this is the only way that they could do it. Others are saying it's just to push the seasonal battle passes, and now the manhunts are going to change from monthly to weekly. Listen, I could be 100% wrong, but the way I interpret going to a seasonal character model, that communicates to me they're downshifting, and they're gonna take people off of Div 2 and put them on Div 3, because I feel like the seasonal model is, and it's easier to support. Like, you don't need as many people. Well, then just
do that. Like, I don't know, like just do that. Like, I don't know that you need to have, I don't know that you need to spit in the eye of your player base. Like, you can just make an announcement of like, hey, Division 2's been out for however many years now. I want to say it's like 6 probably. At least 5. Division 2's been out for however many years now. We're gonna stop development because Division 3 we're anticipating release in 2025 or 2026 at the latest. So if you'll give us time to do that, you're not gonna get new content from us, like, at all. And I think that people probably would have been more okay with that and been like, okay, go make a good Division 3. Like, I'm on board for that. I'll wait for that. Maybe I'll dabble in Division 2 in the meantime. You know, if they could have like a one more game mode type of thing or something like that. I'm trying to think back when I played Division 1, like what the game modes were. There was something called Last Stand or something like that you could play that was like a weird PvP alternative to the Dark Zone. Maybe if they'd have done something like that and they'd been like, this is here for the next year and a half or however long it takes, you know, you can play this is new. But as far as like continual updates, like, we're not going to be doing that. That seems like the smart way to go about it. I don't know why you would give people a carrot on a stick that is like, there's basically a rope in their way that's going to like catch them by the ankles if they chase after the carrot, which is like, oh, now you can't use your character that you've spent, you know, years and years trying to flesh out, and all the gear sets and everything that you have. Maybe you're able to transfer those gear sets. You were able to do that in Division 1, so I don't know. But it just sounds like, it seems so unnecessary, and it seems so unnecessarily, like, not in favor of the current player base experience. So I don't know why they choose to go this route. It's very weird.
Paul says, making it out like it's a blank reset each season is not fair. He says that it's not just resetting and doing the same thing. They're changing the sandbox. Right, but you have to admit that changing the sandbox and having, you know, themes or perks or modifiers, that is very, very low-level content compared to if you're actually doing substantive story delivery, new content, new encounters. Like, I feel like if you're just changing the sandbox and you're doing things like modifiers and things like that, again, I'm okay with this. I just think that's my perspective on it, is that they have to put this game into a version of itself that is easier to manage with like a small live team, like a smaller team of people, to ensure that those sandbox changes are happening, that whatever it is they're doing to update the world so that when you reset a character, you're coming and experiencing this. I think that's how you have to transition away from a game like this. I think that's the biggest challenge of a game like this, is you can't just stop it cold turkey and be like, yep, nothing, we got to work on Div 3. There has to be like this transitional baton pass of you're getting a different type of game update so that we can sort of shift down bandwidth and commitment and start working on the next game. But you want to have people coming back and sort of keeping the game going so that when it comes time for Div 3 to land, you didn't have this giant dry spell of nothing. I don't know if they have much of a choice here. This has to be, I think, a difficult line to straddle, you know.
Well, there certainly wasn't something comparable to this, as far as I recall, for Division 1 before Division 2 came out. Like, I remember that they basically just did, like, hey, go and do some of the old content that we have always had, but maybe we've done, like, slight modifiers or whatever to it, and earn yourself, like exclusive rewards that you can unlock in Division 2, like, when that comes out. And they did that for, like, 8 weeks or 10 weeks before the launch of Division 3. It might have been like 3 months, actually. And I remember that, and I just remember I just didn't have time. Like, there was other stuff going on. But, like, I was still hooked on Division 1, or still interested in Division 1 at that time. So, like, I kind of hated that I couldn't get around to it, because I was like, maybe I do want to play Division 2. And then Division 2 came out, and I was like, this isn't really what I'm looking for. They've changed a lot in terms of tonally and just what I look for out of Division. I really like that setting of being in the Northeast and the snow and everything. So I think that's kind of why I bounced off of the second one. But I don't remember them doing such a drastic shift like this. It seemed like it was kind of always obvious that they were going to pivot to doing another game, and they just, I don't know. I think that this represents a trend, which is an obsession on the part of developers or publishers, whoever it may be, in retaining some sort of live audience, or else it's a failure. And that may be from the top. That may be the people that, you know, are spending the money and getting the money that are overly concerned with that. And maybe that's a trickle down thing where that's, you know, focused on as a prerogative, or focused on as a priority. But I would caution against that, or advocate against that being something that should be a priority. Like, I think it's okay to not have everyone's attention at all times, all of the time. Because what necessarily is the benefit of that? You know, like, it's great to have engagement, but it's better to have a good game. You know, Multiverses just took a year off because they lost 99% of their player base, or whatever the number was. They came back. Now everybody doesn't think they made the game substantially better. In fact, some people think it might be worse. So it's like, the attention should be, like, people will give you a chance. Like, people showed up for Multiverses, even though they took a year off, because they remembered playing the game a year ago, and they were like, that was a fun experience. I want to see what they've done. I want to see how they've improved that formula. People will do that for Division 2. But, like, Ubisoft is so scared and concerned that, if we don't retain these people all of their lives, like, every month of the year until Division 3 comes out, they won't, like, we'll lose them. And it's like, honestly, you're probably doing yourself less of a favor by keeping them around for bad or mediocre content that you're not putting, like, all of your effort into, and, like, keeping them waiting. And then you're gonna, like, put a bad taste in their mouth, and then maybe they aren't even gonna receive your third game in the way that you want them to. I think this obsession with retention is bad, and people should focus on delivering quality products. Like, Final Shape is bringing people back to Destiny because of word of mouth and because it's quality, apparently. And, like, that's what works. Retaining people through the spring is not what made Final Shape successful. That's an ancillary supplemental thing. Like, if they were able to do that, they were able to have player retention during those months leading up because of I forget, they did, like, Guardian games and a bunch of other stuff. They did Into the Light or whatever it was. Great. That's awesome for them if they were able to do that. But that's not what made Final Shape successful. And, like, doing any of this type of unnecessary bullcrap is not what's going to make Division 3 successful. It'll be that Division 3 is a good game, and everybody recognizes that.
Yeah, Creature's got some commentary. I'm going to push back on some of the stuff that's being said from you as well as chat. I do think you benefit from just the appearance of the game is still going, the game is still around as a lead up to Div 3. I also think if content gets bland, boring, or unenjoyable, that can help your next game, because then the next game's going to feel like a glass of fresh water. You're going to be like, oh my gosh, they made all these great improvements. It's just so excellent. And Creature's saying it's a move to get new players to feel more even with the existing players, and a way to make it easier for more frequent content. They can't come up with thing for players like me easily because we're just too strong. So by creating curated content, it meant for levels 1 through 40 would have to grind easier to make it faster, and to make the player base just doesn't like it. It's not the only path, but it's a path. Yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a good path or a good playbook for a long-standing live service game to shift down in gear. I just think it's very difficult. It's like you've got to, shift your support down, and then you have to ramp up and make the next game amazing. I think what's really going to serve Division 3's good is that Div 2 was supposed to die in 2020, right? They were supposed to EOL this thing, but the community responded so good to Warlords of New York that they charted a path to keep supporting it. So my hope would be that they have spent the last 4 years gathering data and sketching out how to make the next game good from the ground up. Let's not have another deja vu of, yep, the launch version of Div 3 just isn't ready. The end game just hasn't been fleshed out. No, you can't do that again. There'd be no excuse, because this time you had an extra 4 years to try things, to test things, to gather feedback, to study player behavior. So this, I think, is the road to Div 3. I know it's probably, irritating or even not appealing to some people. You're like, you probably won't go back. The only reason you're right is because the calendar's it's just too dadgum full. There's too many games coming out.
But that's something they have to contend with. Like, that's just a reality. So,
sure.
I mean, I think there's a reason that they didn't put this in the show, and I think it was very smart for them to not put it in the show. But if they're smart enough to know that it's not going to go over well, why do it? Like, I just make smart decisions. If you know that something isn't going to go over well with your player base, same thing for Suicide Squad. Like, if you already know, if you have the intuitive foresight to know that this isn't going to go over well, maybe don't do it. Nobody's forcing you to, or if they are, that sucks. And I sympathize with the studio for that reason. But yeah, I just think these developers, especially of these live service games, they've got to make better choices, because people only have so much time. And when you make choices that directly impact the use of and the benefit of your players' time when investing and engaging with your game, that's how you really upset people, and that's how you show people that your world or your space, your ongoing live service, is not the place that they should be interacting with and investing in if you're not going to respect their time. And so that's the issue with this. That was the issue with Diablo. And why can't they learn from that? Like, it's the same thing we were saying about Suicide Squad and Avengers before it. It's like there's more than a couple of people, Anthem and others, that have made the mistakes that you could have learned from. Why have you not learned? And so, like, this is a great example of, like, Diablo got a lot of flack for this. They're on a recovery arc right now. Why couldn't you have learned from that? You wouldn't have needed a recovery arc. But if people don't respond well to this, they have themselves to blame.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised, Creature saying it's the road to Div 3. Unfortunately, it'll be the door out for Div 2 for many. It wouldn't shock me at all if a couple seasons from now, some of y'all get the itch and you're like, you know what? I kind of want to play a seasonal character. Like that happened with No Man's Sky for a lot of people. Expeditions made it very approachable. It's like, yeah, I can go back to a really, really deep and robust game and just kind of have all of those early game, exhilarating experiences condensed down into a sandwich that I can eat instead of it being this massive buffet that's going to take you forever to work your way through. I wouldn't be shocked if some of the Div loyal walk away and they end up coming back, because that seasonal formula, it works. I think it does. I don't like it. I don't. But I'm telling you, I'm hearing good things about Diablo, and I'm like, maybe my wife and I could boot up some seasonal characters. It's that really, really good returning player door, new player door, and you may not like it now, but you may come back through later. It would be my estimation. So we got to end it there, though. I got to go to writer's room.
If you want some good seasonal content, Skull and Bones, baby.
Oh, for frick's sake. Yeah, there you go. It's so good that Kirk's not playing it. All right.
It's a good point. It's a very good point.
Guys, do me a favor. We only need about 20 more likes. It'll really help this video out. A little lighter turnout whenever we do anything Ubisoft, but you can help us out right now by smashing a like button. Get us to 200 likes. I'm going to spam a link in chat. We're going to go to Writer's Room. This is a great opportunity for members to see behind the scenes. You get to see how these shows are made and planned. Kirk sometimes hangs out for a little bit, and then we kick him out and we get to work because we got to plan these shows. We haven't had to plan or do an upload in a while because of all of the Summer Game Fest stuff.
Yeah, baby.
That made it to where I just got the co-stream a lot. So click the link in chat. Come on with us. I'm going to go live in just a second. Kirk's name is clickable in the description. Give him some love and go subscribe to his channel. And Thanks so much for being a member. You may have gotten gifted a member today or in the past couple of days. People have been going crazy. We are already at like 276 plus that 35. That's a lot of members already. You guys are at 311. The goal for the week's only 400. You guys are easily going to get the goal as well as the stretch goal. It'll be a scary game Friday night, and my wife can mess with me if you hit that stretch goal. I'm going to end our Ubisoft Forward, kind of reaction stream and bring folks over. Thank you guys so much for supporting that. Oh, I don't have my Chrome browser.
Still saying waiting.